Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited to be joined today by Evan Thames to share his inspirational story and to provide encouragement for others out there that are working to break through to that next level, whatever that may be. How are you doing today, Evan?
I'm doing great, Andy. It's a beautiful day out here in East Knoxville, Tennessee. So we're having a great day out here. It's staying busy, but we're doing great.
That's a beautiful place to be, too. Absolutely. So that's good to hear. I recently saw a post that you had done on LinkedIn, right? And it resonated with me. It really did. And obviously, it resonated with a whole lot of people because as of the last time I checked it, you have 7,442 likes, 658 comments, and 218 reposts. So it's a great story and a great post. What were you expecting that kind of a response?
No, no, not at all. It was really just wild seeing the numbers climb day after day. And I remember hitting 500, and that was pretty cool. Then it went over 1,000, and that's like, wow, that's crazy. And then it kind of kept taking off. So I think, kind of to your point, I think the story just really resonated, and I think that picture has a lot of impact. Just kind of seeing that hard work juxtaposed against kind of that college degree was interesting for a lot of people to see. So had a lot of people reach out and kind of say it connected with their stories as well, or they had had a similar experience. So I think it just tied into what a lot of people have already done, and it was cool to see how it resonated.
Oh, it was a great story. And I believe your story will inspire a lot of people, and I want to go back a long ways, back to the beginning, to help people understand more about you. So, can you tell us a little bit about where did you grow up and tell us a little bit about your family?
Yes, sir. So I'm originally from Asheville, North Carolina. That region is about an hour and a half from where we're from. My parents were both from Chicago, so they moved north down this way. My mom was a little bit more middle class. My dad actually grew up in a pretty rough neighborhood called the Cabrini Green Projects.
Oh,
And to make a
yeah.
long story short, he was actually able to escape that. He was raised by a single parent, did the best they could, but just wasn't the best situation for him to have success later in life. A lot of people wind up a statistic in one, you know, fashion or another. So he was able to escape that and actually went on again, skipping a lot of the story to get a master's degree in education. So
That's
that
awesome.
kind of yeah, it was really kind of an incredible journey he took, and it had plenty of different curves and winds in that journey. But he was able to get a master's degree in education. My mom went through some post-secondary schooling, but stopped when they got married. But there's six of us kids, and she homeschooled all of us. So we've all been
Wow.
able to, yeah, pretty wild.
Gee.
Don't ask me how she did it, and don't ask me how she had the patience, but she homeschooled us through a move, through a lot of different things, and did a great job. We're all in school. Made it through some post-secondary schooling, so did an incredible job. And we've been here in Knoxville, Tennessee for, I guess, over 15 years now. So this is kind of what we call home now. And my mom was always the kind of entrepreneurial side of the family, and she would encourage us to do anything that um, sounded like a good opportunity to make money. So she would drive me around town, helping me, pick up iPhones I was going to flip or whatever. My dad was a little bit more of the realist side. He was more so find a good job with a good salary and make sure to get through school. So there's a little bit of that yin and yang that really kind of gave me a really uh, centered lifestyle that I could use to propel me forward. So that gives you a little bit of a background of my family.
Sure. Cabrini Green was in a movie. I think it was Candyman, maybe. Was that it?
Yeah, it may have been. It was rough, and it actually got
Yeah.
rougher after my dad left. So
Oh,
gang banging, drugs, all those things, pretty much anything you think about, he got somewhat exposed to at some point. So it was really a miracle, and his uncle that really helped to pull them out of that before it actually declined even worse as time went on. He was there back in the 60s, and it hasn't gotten better since. So it was pretty incredible how he was able to get out of that and then again get a master's in education from Clemson.
oh, that's awesome. My son has a mowing route, so I help him with mowing. And it's a free
Okay.
workout. Don't have to join a gym, right? And so
Yeah,
you
exactly.
have a story about your time in college. We're going to talk about that. But my dad was a great mentor to me, and he helped me with my mowing route. And he was an Army veteran, and
Mhm.
he was a great mentor. But in your post, you talked about some of the obstacles you had to overcome, right? working a physically demanding job while attending college and some of the things that happened along the way, right? Can you tell us
Yep.
a little bit about that journey and what inspired you to push through?
Well, to go back even ahead of those obstacles you just mentioned, I also didn't want to go to college. So that
Oh,
was yet another obstacle. Um, Again, I was always kind of an entrepreneur at heart, and I had things that I invested a lot of time in, and me and my dad would go back and forth. You need to go to school? No, I think I'm a kid genius. I'll figure out a way to make $1 million without school. So that was the first obstacle. But we can get into that a little bit later. Um, Once I actually kind of put my head down and decided that that's what I wanted to do, I started off at a community college, spent a couple of years there, got my 2 year degree. And then I really didn't want to go into a bunch of debt to go to the University of Tennessee. So I took a gap year and started working for a friend that was going to pay me a little bit more than what I was making. And I figured, okay, maybe I can kind of and save up for the second half of my education at the University of Tennessee. Well, what was kind of interesting is one day, me and my friend were driving. I was actually mowing for him. Um, at the time, it was called Cut Above Lawn Care. And we were just driving around, and I don't know if he turned to me or he might have just been looking straight ahead and said, "You need to go back to school and you need to go back basically this semester," right? It was a little bit before the semester was going to start. And he just had that epiphany that I really need to go back to school. And he was a longtime church friend, and I really kind of trusted him. And from that point, I just started looking for avenues to get back. And my sister had worked at the University of Tennessee, and they had this very underpublished, little known program where if you worked full time for their university, they would give you 9 free credit hours per semester. So full time school is considered, I believe, 12 credit hours, so 12 to
yeah,
15. So if you went through the summer, you could get up to 27 hours a year, which is basically full time for
yeah,
free. So the only challenge was you had to be a full time employee, right? If you were part time, they prorated that amount. So that was my big opportunity, and I started to inquire and see what opportunities were there. And I had an interview, and I made it clear to who was interviewing me that, hey, I'm really here for school. The pay wasn't incredible, but if you take all that debt load away, then it kind of makes makes the compensation package look a lot better. So from that point, it was a grind because my main role there was ultimately to get my education. It wasn't to so much work as to get my education. So we had to make it fit. And props to the University of Tennessee and the crew that I worked with. They did a lot of things to help me out, but sometimes that would look like stopping what we were doing. They would drive me to class, or I would literally drive my lawnmower to class, stop, get off my lawnmower, go inside, might be covered in grass some days. It's funny because I work with some individuals that actually remember me from those days, and they would remember me coming in my work gear and my, grass and whatever else hitched a ride
right.
with me.
Yeah,
And so it was tough. There were times when I would go into work at 3 a.m., go to class at 9, get back out around 12, and then work the rest of my, shift. And some days that might go till 3, 4, 5, 6 o'clock, and then repeat it the next day. Um, so those were some of the challenges that I faced. And ultimately, it was just about grinding through them and keeping my head down because, again, it wasn't a traditional route. I didn't have a lot of beacons of wisdom to point to in terms of how do I get through this while working full time. But ultimately, God helped me. And then I had a good support group that helped me to get through that. So a lot of the challenges were just the tiredness, trying to make both fit, getting to professor hours to make sure I had the help I needed. And we made it work, but it was very challenging.
absolutely. One of the reasons that resonated with me, I worked through college. I was lucky. A good friend of mine was working at a early software company in logistics, and they needed somebody to enter driver logs. This was 1992. So driver logs, I'd get a stack of driver logs, hundreds and hundreds of them. And they were using that for unload times, unload rates, stop times, finding the accounts that were detaining drivers and things like that. So, anyways, I just had thousands and thousands. Sometimes I would go to Norman, Oklahoma, do some
Uh,
classes, go to work, go back to Norman, Oklahoma, do some classes, and you go back to work at night. And I remember I saw in your story like dozing off during class. That happened.
Multiple times.
God, I mean, just the physical exhaustion of a full-time college curriculum and then what you were doing, mowing is so physically demanding. I can't imagine the exhaustion level, honestly.
No, it was pretty incredible some days. And fortunately, my professors, they knew I was there working full time, so they completely understood and worked with me. But I think to get to the inspiration piece, I didn't really answer that. To me, it's just once you decide to do something, you have to see it through.
Right.
So there was no big long-term goal in my head. It's just once I decided that that was what I was going to do, I was going to complete that path. So I think it goes to my story and the entire story about just grinding and getting up and doing the hard things of life to get to an end goal, even when you don't necessarily have that inspiration in the moment. So set my mind to it. That's what I was going to do. And it sounds like you did the same thing. And you just do what it takes. It doesn't come down to the end goal. Sometimes it just comes down to waking up and getting it done.
Yeah, well, yours was much more physically demanding. I got to say that.
It
Okay. But besides,
was tough.
I was a 10 key, whiz by the end of that, but not mowing. And I mowed this morning with my son. So I know how exhausting it can be. But you know, it is an inspirational story of what you've done. And I
Yes,
think it
sir.
will
Absolutely.
inspire a lot of people to, I almost dropped out my junior year, Evan. I was so worn out. And my dad was the one that said, Andy, if you drop out, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. But so why don't you just push on through, maybe pull back from your schedule a little bit and so forth. And I'm so thankful we had that conversation because I was really close. Like, I'm done. I can't do this.
Yeah.
And he said, you're going to regret it. And I thought about that and I'm like, yeah, I bet I would really regret it. So I went ahead and pushed on through. For those people out there facing difficult circumstances, right? What would you say are two or three keys to success in breaking through to that thing you want or that next level?
I would say number one is having a good support group because, especially when you're younger, you don't necessarily know exactly what you want out of life and necessarily the best way to get there. So, I had a great support group that was sometimes just able to inject a word or inject a comment that really resonated with me, just like my friend did driving down the road in his truck and said, "Hey, you need to go back." And it just resonated with me at that time when it hadn't resonated as strongly when my dad was saying it. He's still much to his chagrin. But, sometimes just having an awesome support group that'll help push you. And I can think of one case in particular. Um, a person that I know where I would say they would dedicate a lot of where they are today and even where they are collegiately to the support group they had. That sometimes it's like, hey, come over our house. We're going to help you get signed up. We're going to help you get admitted, right? Because sometimes in and of ourselves, we're not motivated to do things on our own. And so having a support group, not just from a networking standpoint, but that can just help push you when you don't feel like it is truly underrated. So having the right friends, the right support group, people that are successful or people that are working to be successful,
Right.
right? So it could be peers, but just anyone that is going the right direction, going the same direction you're going, it's important to align yourself with those kind of people, right? So I think that's number one. Number two would be don't be afraid to get outside of your comfort zone. And that can come in a number of ways because I think when you say that, people are always think of a shy personality or somebody that's afraid to get out there. I was not a shy personality, but I was afraid to get out of my comfort zone because I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I thought was going to make me successful. I had that planned out. Frankly, it wasn't working. It wasn't going to work. And eventually, I had to decide that I can take a route to the success that I want to have um, in a different manner than I think it has to be. So, getting outside of your comfort zone doesn't mean you're shy and you don't want to sing or something like that. Sometimes it may mean you just have this way of thinking and this way that you're going to accomplish it. And maybe somebody is able to suggest that something that would really be better for you if you would stop and think about it. So don't be afraid to take a different path to success than you see it. And then I think the final aspect is really what was resonating in my post, which is just keep grinding because no amount of motivational quotes or self-help books or anything of that sort is going to get you up at 2 a.m. in the morning to go to work. And I think that's where the rub is for a lot of people is they have this grand idea of success and a plan to get there, but they're not necessarily to do the tiny things on a day-to-day basis. Just for a quick example, I remember one day it was getting close to the start of the semester for University of Tennessee, and I was trying to get everything lined up, and I had to grab my transcripts from our local community college in paper form and take them over to the University of Tennessee. Right? That's a tiny, tiny piece of my success. But had I not done that, I might not have gotten signed up in time. Who knows if I would have went back the next semester. So sometimes your success looks like picking up a piece of paper from another school and taking it to another one. And people miss those small tasks in day-to-day life, trying to just go after the big, kind of more glorious um, ideas that they have of success. So I think good support group, not being afraid to get outside of your comfort zone, and then grinding through the big things and then grinding through the tiny things and just getting them out of the way quickly is incredibly important. It was important to my success as well.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I've been in business development for about 25 years, and it's
Mhm.
thousands and thousands of follow-ups and touch bases, right? And you hear stories of people hunting the white whale, right? If they got this
Yeah,
one
yeah,
account. But if you got like four mid-tier accounts, that equals a white whale. So it's like, um, it's been a lot of what you said, grind, right?
Mhm.
You wake up and you go, I've got these 25 things I better do. And don't go chasing that shiny thing, whatever that might
Exactly.
be. Just do the daily things you got to do to get you to a place. I totally agree with that.
Absolutely. Sometimes people step over pennies chasing dollars and then wind up with neither. So
Yeah.
it's just incredibly important to do the small things that ultimately add up to a big thing in the future. And then sometimes if you don't do those small things, you don't know what you're missing out on 2 to 3 years from now. So incredibly important.
Absolutely. And with that software company I was telling you about, we started out working with like 15 and 20 truck fleets, right? By the time I was exiting from there, I was with that group of people 14 years. We were working with all the big players, JB Hunt, Swift, Knight. They used to be separate, right?
Mhm.
CRST
Yeah.
and so forth. But it didn't start there.
Yeah,
Started with
exactly.
the
Exactly.
15 and 25 truck fleets, got enough of them, then some 100 truck fleets, and then some 500 truck fleets. And then, they're like, then you're at the JB Hunts of the world, and the riders of the world and whatever. But it took a lot of block steps to get there. Basically, it didn't happen
Exactly.
like, hey, we landed it, year one. It just wasn't the way it was. So, on the kind of the flip side of that question, what are two or three pitfalls to avoid?
I think, and this is going to tie right back into what I was saying earlier, but being too narrow-minded. I think especially people that have an entrepreneurial mindset can somewhat tend to be more my way or the highway, which is definitely how I was as a kid and why me and my dad kind of argued back and forth so much. And again, if you're willing to take the opportunities that come to you instead of constantly trying to make an opportunity, sometimes you'll waste a lot less time and in some cases even money and enjoy the same success that you want to see long term. So I think there's a good balance. I can remember as a kid, there was one thing in particular that it was kind of a hobby, but I put a lot of time into it, trying to make money with it. And I put in hundreds of hours. Sometimes it would be distracting me during class. Sometimes I would skip out on doing things with friends, um, trying to force success out of this one thing as I saw as success. And I remember coming to a point where I finally decided that it wasn't healthy, right? And it wasn't something I needed to keep chasing. And when I did that, I was able to open my mind up to, okay, here's still my end goal. What other avenues can I find? Um, and in a lot of ways, I've been able to achieve those same ideas of a success without what I was locked into as this is going to be my avenue to it. So I think not being narrow-minded is important. Um, I would say also not putting too much pressure on yourself to do things the way that everybody else did it or follow the same paths of success that they had. So, for example, it's typical for people to think they need to graduate in 4 years, and they'll put all sorts of pressure on themselves to do that and get into all sorts of debt, to try to make that happen. And it took me 6 or 7 years. I've got a sister that it took around 8 or 9, right? But ultimately, when I came out, I had extremely little debt. right? I had the same education everybody else had, and I was better for it. So sometimes not putting too much pressure on yourself to succeed at the same time that everybody else is, to graduate when everybody else is, to take the same path. I think that's also important is to understand that you have your own path and that might look a little bit different, but maybe it's the healthiest path for you to go down. So that's also important. And then the last thing, I think the pitfall for especially people, early 20s, looking to get a degree is debt. Just being careful, to make sure that what they're going after makes sense from a financial standpoint and that you don't start off your career really just repaying the government. So I think that's something that maybe a lot of people find taboo or don't talk about, but I think it's extremely important to investigate what ways can I get through school and not have, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt when
Yeah,
they get out. So I think that's kind of more practical, but it's also an important piece of pitfalls I think people should avoid.
absolutely. And it took me 6 years and I ended up
Yep,
with very little debt at the end, right? And it was that exactly what you're talking about. Picking a field that you like, at least like somewhat, and then getting and not accumulating a massive amount of debt as well, and making sure there is a way at the end that you could work your way up at least to a point that it makes sense financially. So I totally
exactly.
agree with that. So now you broke through, you graduated from college, and now you're a team leader at Axle Logistics. Can you tell us a little bit about your professional journey so far and some of your plans and goals for the future?
Absolutely. So my path to Axel was a little interesting because again, what I do now relates nothing to the accounting degree that I earned. I figured out pretty quickly that accounting wasn't for me, but I was already there and I'm the kind of person that's going to go ahead and finish it. It was a good all-around degree to have. But ultimately I decided I didn't really want a salary role. I wanted something that would allow me to push the boundaries and to kind of control my own destiny to some degree. So about a year and a half before I started at Axel, I actually saw them at a mock career fair. So it's basically a practice career fair.
Okay.
And the people that were manning it were taking it serious. So you could tell some people weren't really taking it serious. And these guys were, right? They were, excited to explain what Axel was like, what Axel was all about. And they showed me this little pamphlet showing like the 5-year earnings of what you can make. And I was like, that can't possibly be true. This is crazy. But I went and checked them out. And we were based downtown Knoxville at the time. And I checked out the office and the energy there was just wild. You don't see energy, the way it was at that office very often. And it was, people were excited to be there. People were working, people were hustling, people were excited. And it was infectious. And it's something I really wanted to be a part of. So about a year and a half later, I applied there and I got the job and really it's matched to pretty much all the hype. It's been exactly what I thought it would be. And it's been extremely exciting. Salesman of the year in 2022. And right now I'm a team lead with 5 people that work underneath me and they're all, incredible people and, great to work with and do a great job at their job. Um, and it's just been, logistics is always going to be tough. It's not for everybody. There's quite a bit involved with it. Some days you want to pull your hair out, but it's what I signed up for. And, they compensate us extremely well to do what we do. So really enjoy it. We're on an awesome journey. And kind of my 15, 20-year goal is to kind of continue to scale, right? Continue to grow here. I guess the next natural step would be a general manager for me. So that's kind of my next goal. Continue to scale, see where I can get to within this company. It's done great by me. So see myself here for a while. I'm also kind of entrepreneurial. So I did start a coffee business, sometime back. It kind of flopped, but I'm always kind of hunting for something I can do on the side, something to make a little extra. It's just the entrepreneurial side of me that'll never go away. So, I'm always looking for those opportunities as well. So who knows? My coffee may come back at some point, but kind of those 20-year goals just continue to progress and, see where life leads.
Sure, absolutely. And I bet you learned a lot from that coffee business for the next one because I've
I did.
always,
I did.
going back to about 2008, I've always had a side gig, right? Now I've been CEO of this company for 5.5 years now. But before that, I had a promotional products business and I did outside advertising and marketing stuff. but the promotional products business got shut down because of a
Mhm.
government change. They banned the use of promotional products in hospitals and clinics as a part of the new health
Interesting.
care thing. And 85% of my business was promotional products in hospitals and clinics. So what I learned from that is don't put all your eggs in one industry basket, right? Got to get a
Absolutely.
little bit diverse, right? Do a little bit more than just one thing. I learned that the hard way.
Yes, and in my case, what I learned is you have to make sure there's a market and marketing channels to grow your product because I was started out as e-commerce only largely,
Yeah,
and you run out of friends and family pretty quick. So if you don't have a way to market your product in a way that's, doesn't cost more than, and I know that's popular, that you got a lot of unicorn companies out here spending way more marketing dollars than they're bringing in, but it wasn't feasible for me.
right.
So really making sure
Right.
that you have economical avenues to sell your product um, is something that will for sure happen in the future because again, you're out of friends and family very quickly, and then you have to find and attract other people at a cost that's not going to exceed your cost per unit. So that's what I learned. We'll brainstorm and maybe we'll come back at it from a different angle in the future. But always lessons to learn, and as long as you learn them, you're going to be better for it. So
Absolutely. No, you're right. I've learned way more from the difficult times than I did from when the things were just flowing smooth. I've learned so much more from all of that stuff. So, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. What are the best ways for people to connect with you, Evan?
well, I'm on. I guess the best way would probably be LinkedIn. Evan Timms, Thames. So I'm pretty active on there. So that's probably the best way. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, those type of things. But professionally, LinkedIn is what I use the majority of the time.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks again for coming on the show, Evan, and for sharing your story and providing insights that I'm sure will help others. So, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely, Andy. Greatly appreciate you having me on, and it's been fun to be able to share my story, and hopefully it'll inspire others.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for our show today. Thanks for listening or watching, everybody, and we will see you again on the next one. Take care.